I never thought my regular Friday night KFC run would change my life forever. My name is Oliver, and I work as a software developer in Reading. After a long week of staring at computer screens, I always treat myself to a bucket of fried chicken. It's been my ritual for the past 2 years, ever since I moved into my flat near the shopping center. That Friday started like any other. The autumn wind swept through Reading's streets, making the shop signs swing back and forth. The KFC store sat between a phone repair shop and a convenience store, its red and white sign glowing in the darkness. I pushed open the glass door at exactly 8:10 p.m., and the warm smell of fried chicken wrapped around me like a blanket. Sarah, the cashier I'd grown familiar with, smiled as I approached the counter. "The usual, Oliver?" she asked, already punching in my order. I nodded, fishing out my wallet. The restaurant was quiet, with only a couple of teenagers sitting in the corner, sharing a box of wings. "Rough week?" Sarah asked while preparing my order. I told her about the new project at work that had kept me late most evenings. The kitchen behind her buzzed with activity as the cooks prepared my fresh batch of chicken. Everything felt normal, comfortable, routine. When Sarah handed me my bucket, our fingers brushed briefly. I remember that moment clearly because it was the last normal thing that happened that night. The bucket felt unusually cold, despite the steaming chicken inside. I dismissed it as nothing, paid, and turned to leave. That's when I felt it. A slight tremor running through the cardboard, like a phone vibrating in my pocket. I almost dropped the bucket in surprise. Looking back at Sarah, I wondered if she had noticed anything strange, but she was already serving another customer. At 8:15 p.m., standing under the fluorescent lights of that KFC, holding a shaking bucket of chicken, I had no idea that my life was about to take a turn into something I couldn't have imagined even in my wildest dreams. Or should I say nightmares? Walking home with my vibrating bucket, I tried to convince myself I was just tired. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and the evening had grown unusually quiet. No cars passed by, no people walked the streets. It was as if Reading had suddenly become a ghost town. The bucket's vibrations grew stronger with each step. The cold sensation spread from the cardboard into my fingers, up my arms, until my whole body felt like I'd stepped into a freezer. I looked inside the bucket, expecting to see something wrong with the chicken, but what I saw made my heart skip a beat. The pieces of chicken were moving, not just shifting around, they were pulsing, like they were breathing. I stopped walking and stared. The steam rising from the bucket had turned an odd shade of blue, swirling in patterns that reminded me of writing in a language I didn't understand. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. When I pulled it out, the screen showed 8:20 p.m., but the numbers kept changing randomly, flickering between different times. The streetlight above me flickered and went out, then the next one, and the next. One by one, the lights were going dark, leaving me in growing shadows. I should have dropped the bucket and run. That's what any sensible person would have done. But something kept me rooted to the spot. The cold had spread to my chest now, and I could see my breath forming crystals in the air. The bucket started to hum, a low, deep sound that made my teeth rattle. Inside the bucket, the chicken pieces had started to arrange themselves in a circle. The steam had formed a column now, rising straight up despite the wind. And in that column I saw faces forming, dozens of them, twisting and morphing, their mouths open in silent screams. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the bucket, but I couldn't let go. It felt like the cardboard had fused to my skin. The humming grew louder, and words began to form in my mind. Words in languages that had died thousands of years ago, yet somehow I understood them. They were trying to tell me something. Something about an ancient wrong that needed to be made right. And somehow, this bucket of KFC had become a gateway between their world and mine. The words in my head became clearer, forming a story that made my blood run cold. Centuries ago, the land where the KFC now stood had been something else. A place of power, a gateway. The spirits showed me visions of hooded figures performing rituals under the moon, of sacrifices made to keep the balance between worlds. But progress had buried their sacred ground under concrete and steel. The KFC had been built right on top of their most powerful site, and now they needed someone to help them restore the balance. They had chosen me, marking me through countless Friday night visits, waiting for the right moment when the stars aligned. The bucket in my hands had turned ice cold, frost forming on its sides. My fingers should have been frostbitten, but instead, they burned with an inner fire. The chicken pieces were now floating inside the bucket, suspended in a swirling vortex of that strange blue steam. Through the visions, I learned that I needed to return to KFC. The spirits had a task for me, a ritual that needed to be performed before midnight. If I failed, they warned, the barrier between worlds would break completely, releasing things far worse than a few angry spirits. The street around me had transformed. The modern buildings seemed to flicker, showing glimpses of what had stood there before. Stone circles, wooden towers, ancient paths worn into the earth. Reality was becoming thin, stretching like plastic wrap about to tear. I checked my phone again. The screen had stopped flickering and showed 8:45 p.m. I had just over 3 hours to figure out what these spirits wanted and how to do it. The weight of this responsibility pressed down on me like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. The bucket pulled me forward, leading me back toward the KFC. With each step, more visions filled my head. Instructions, warnings, promises. The spirits were preparing me for what needed to be done, but their urgency carried an undertone of fear. Whatever was trying to break through from the other side had them terrified. The walk back to KFC felt like moving through a dream. The bucket pulled me along like a compass pointing north, its contents still swirling with that supernatural energy. As I approached the restaurant, I saw Sarah through the window, still serving customers who had no idea what was happening. But something had changed. The KFC sign above the door flickered with more than electrical problems. In the moments of darkness between flashes, I saw symbols burning in the air, the same ones I'd seen in the steam. The whole building seemed to pulse with a hidden heartbeat. When I pushed open the door, the normal sounds of the restaurant, conversations, cooking, the hum of drinks machines, all faded away. Instead, I heard whispers, chants, the echo of drums from centuries past. The spirits were getting stronger. Sarah looked up as I approached the counter, her eyes widening at my return. "Oliver, is something wrong with your order?" But when she saw my face, she stopped. Later, she told me I looked like I'd seen a ghost, or rather, like I'd become one. My face pale and my eyes glowing with a strange light. The bucket guided my hands, placing itself on the counter. The blue steam leaked out, curling around Sarah's fingers. She gasped, not from cold or fear, but from recognition. The spirits had chosen her too, marking her through all those Friday night transactions. We weren't random choices. We were the last links in a chain that stretched back centuries. The teenagers in the corner had gone quiet. The cooks in the kitchen stood frozen. Time seemed to slow down, stretching like taffy. Sarah reached out and touched the bucket, adding her energy to mine. The whispers grew louder, and the instructions became clear. We had to close the restaurant and prepare it for the ritual. With Sarah's help, we quickly cleared out the remaining customers. She put up the closed sign while I used the bucket's power to create a barrier around the building. Anyone looking in would see a normal, closed KFC. They wouldn't notice the blue light pulsing through the windows or hear the ancient chants echoing off the tiles. The spirits guided us through the preparation. We pushed tables aside, creating a space in the center of the restaurant. The bucket's contents, no longer recognizable as chicken, formed a circle on the floor, marking out the sacred points of power. Sarah retrieved specific items from the kitchen, salt, herbs, and spices that were more than just seasonings. The Colonel's secret recipe, it turned out, wasn't just about taste. Those 11 herbs and spices matched exactly what the ancient priests had used in their rituals. It wasn't a coincidence that KFC had been built here, or that their signature blend had become famous worldwide. The spirits had been influencing things for longer than we realized. As we worked, Sarah shared what the spirits were telling her. She'd been having strange dreams for months, visions of this night, of the ritual we needed to perform. The spirits had been preparing both of us, waiting for this exact moment when the barriers between worlds would be thinnest. The temperature in the restaurant dropped steadily. Our breath formed clouds in the air, and frost patterns spread across the windows. The normal lights flickered and died, replaced by the otherworldly blue glow emanating from our circle. The bucket, now empty of its transformed contents, sat in the center, pulsing with power. Time was running out. Through the windows we could see darker shapes moving in the shadows outside. The things trying to break through were getting stronger, pushing against the weakening barriers. We had to complete the ritual before they found a way in. At exactly 11:30 p.m., the ritual began. Sarah and I stood on opposite sides of the circle, the bucket between us. The spirits' voices filled our heads, teaching us words and languages that hadn't been spoken aloud for millennia. The blue light pulsed in rhythm with our chanting. The floor beneath the circle began to change. The modern tiles faded away, revealing the ancient stone beneath. The walls of the KFC seemed to disappear, showing us glimpses of the sacred grove that had once stood here. Past and present merged, reality bending around us like paper in the wind. Our voices grew stronger, the chants building in power. The bucket lifted off the ground, spinning slowly in the air. Inside it, a vortex of energy formed, reaching up toward the ceiling. The Colonel's face on the walls seemed to watch us, his expression changing from his familiar smile to something older, wiser, more knowing. But something was wrong. The shadows outside had grown darker, pressing against the windows. We could hear them now, scratching, whispering, trying to find a way in. The barrier I'd created was weakening. One of the windows cracked, a thin line appearing in the frost-covered glass. The spirits urged us to chant faster, their voices taking on an edge of panic. The ritual wasn't just about restoring balance. It was about preventing something much worse from breaking through. The things outside weren't just spirits or ghosts. They were older, darker, hungry for our world. Sarah grabbed my hands across the circle, completing the connection. Power surged through us, making the blue light flare brilliantly. The bucket spun faster, the vortex inside it growing stronger. The cracked window shattered, letting in a blast of cold air and reaching shadows. We had seconds left. The ritual had to be completed now, or everything would be lost. The spirits poured their knowledge into us, showing us the final steps. Together, Sarah and I spoke the last words of the chant, our voices joining into one. The bucket exploded with light, becoming a pillar of blue fire that reached from floor to ceiling. The shadows that had broken through recoiled, hissing in ancient tongues. Sarah's hands tightened on mine as the power flowing through us intensified. The floor beneath us cracked open, revealing a swirling vortex of energy, the true gateway that had been hidden here for centuries. Through it, we could see other places, other times. The spirits showed us visions of how this place had served as a guardian point, keeping our world safe from things that lived in the spaces between reality. Those things were trying to break through now. Dark shapes moved in the vortex, pushing against the barriers. But our ritual was working. The gateway was repairing itself, the ancient magic strengthening. The bucket, now transformed into pure energy, served as a key, locking the doorway once again. Sarah and I felt the spirits moving through us, using our bodies as anchors in the physical world. Our voices spoke words we didn't know. Our hands moved in patterns we'd never learned. The cold intensified until it felt like we were standing in the heart of winter. The shadows made one final push, a tendril of darkness wrapping around Sarah's ankle. She screamed, but didn't let go of my hands. Together, we pushed back, channeling the spirit's power. The darkness retreated, driven back by the blue fire. With a sound like thunder, the gateway sealed itself. The bucket's energy collapsed inward, taking the vortex with it. Reality snapped back into place like a rubber band, leaving us standing in a normal KFC restaurant. The windows were whole, the floor uncracked. Even the tables we'd moved were back in their original positions. When we finally let go of each other's hands, it was past midnight. Sarah and I stood in the silent restaurant, trying to process what had happened. The bucket sat innocently between us, looking like nothing more than a normal KFC bucket. But now we could see the symbols hidden in its design, the protection spells woven into the cardboard. The spirits were quiet now, their presence gentle rather than urgent. They had chosen us as their new guardians, tasking us with watching over the gateway. The KFC would remain as a cover, hiding the true purpose of this place from the modern world. Sarah found new meaning in her job, understanding why she'd felt drawn to work here. I knew my Friday night routine would never be the same. We were part of something ancient now, something important. The Colonel's smiling face on the wall held new significance. Was he just a businessman who'd stumbled upon an ancient recipe? Or had he known more than he let on? Outside, Reading continued as normal. Cars passed by. People walked home from late nights out. None of them knew how close our world had come to breaking. None of them saw the blue light that still flickered faintly around the edges of the KFC sign, or noticed how the shadows moved differently around the building. I still come here every Friday night, but now it's more than just dinner. Sarah and I maintain the protective spells, strengthen the barriers, keep watch for any signs of the darkness trying to return. The spirits guide us, teaching us more about our roles as guardians. And sometimes, when the restaurant is quiet and the lights are low, we can still hear the ancient chants echoing off the walls. The bucket on my table might vibrate slightly, reminding me that magic is real, that there are things in this world beyond our understanding, that sometimes the most ordinary places hide the most extraordinary secrets. Every time I walk past the KFC now, I smile, knowing that behind its modern facade, ancient powers are at work. And if you ever visit the KFC in Reading and feel a strange cold spot, or see blue steam rising from your bucket, don't be afraid. It's just us, the Guardians, keeping watch over the gateway, making sure your world stays safe. Just remember, some fast food orders come with a side of destiny. My name is Marcus R., and I work at the KFC in rural Savannah, Georgia. The events I'm about to share happened during my late-night cleaning shift. Most people think working at a fast food place is boring, but what happened that night changed everything I believed about reality. It was nearly 2 a.m., and I was alone in the restaurant. The usual sounds filled the empty space, the quiet hum of the refrigerators, the occasional drip from the sinks, and the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights above. The smell of fried chicken and herbs still hung in the air from the day's service. I had my cleaning routine down pat, wiped the counters, mopped the floors, and cleaned the kitchen equipment. Everything was normal until I started working near the main dining area. That's when I first noticed something strange about the big portrait of Colonel Sanders that hung on the wall. I'd seen that picture hundreds of times before. The Colonel's friendly smile, his signature white suit, and those kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But tonight, something felt different. I couldn't shake the feeling that those painted eyes were watching my every move. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was just tired. The late hours can play tricks on your mind, right? But every time I turned away and looked back, those eyes seemed to have moved just a little bit, following me across the room. The digital clock on the wall clicked at 2:00 a.m., and that's when things got really weird. I was cleaning near the kitchen when I heard it, a soft whisper coming from the direction of the deep fryers. At first I thought it was just the sound of the old building settling, or maybe the wind outside. "Marcus," the voice whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. I froze, my mop handle gripped tight in my hands. The voice had a southern drawl, like honey dripping slowly from a spoon. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking a little. "Is someone there?" The restaurant was locked up tight. I had checked all the doors myself. There couldn't be anyone else inside. The whispers came again, a little louder this time. "Come closer, Marcus. We need to talk about the recipe." I walked slowly toward the deep fryers, my heart pounding in my chest. The metal surfaces of the kitchen equipment reflected the dim light, creating strange shadows. The whispers seemed to be coming from inside the largest fryer, the one we used for making the original recipe chicken. As I got closer, I noticed something else. The oil in the fryer was moving, even though it had been turned off hours ago. Small bubbles were rising to the surface, as if something was stirring it from below. The bubbling in the fryer grew stronger, and the whispers became clearer. "Marcus, my boy," the voice said, sounding exactly like I imagined Colonel Sanders would speak. "There's something you need to know about the secret recipe." I couldn't stop myself from moving closer. The smell coming from the fryer wasn't the usual fried chicken smell. It was something older, something that reminded me of dusty old books in forgotten places. "The 11 herbs and spices," the voice continued. "They're more than just seasonings. Each one was chosen not just for taste, but for protection." "Protection from what?" I heard myself ask, even though every part of my brain was screaming at me to run away. The oil in the fryer suddenly swirled into a small whirlpool, and I saw something dark moving beneath the surface. "From them," the voice whispered. "The ones who've been trying to get in for all these years. The recipe keeps them out. But tonight the barrier is weakening." I looked back at the Colonel's portrait, and my blood turned cold. The friendly smile was gone, replaced by a serious, worried expression. The painted eyes were now definitely moving, scanning the restaurant as if searching for something. The lights in the restaurant started to flicker, casting strange shadows on the walls. The whispers from the fryer grew more urgent, and I noticed dark shapes moving in the corners of my eyes. Every time I turned to look directly at them, they disappeared. "Quick, boy," the Colonel's voice commanded from the fryer. "Check the spice cabinet. Make sure all 11 containers are still sealed." There was real fear in his voice now, something I never expected to hear from the face of a fast food chain. I ran to the spice cabinet, my shoes squeaking on the freshly mopped floor. As I opened it, my hands shaking, I counted the special containers of the secret herbs and spices. 1, 2, 3. My heart sank. Container number 7 was open, its seal broken. "No, no, no," I muttered, picking up the container. A dark, oily substance was oozing out from under the lid, nothing like the spices that should have been inside. The temperature in the restaurant dropped suddenly, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the air. The darkness in the corners began to move, to take shape. I heard scratching sounds coming from inside the walls, like hundreds of tiny claws trying to break through. "Listen carefully," the Colonel's voice boomed, now coming from both the fryer and the portrait. "Those spices were blessed by a New Orleans voodoo queen back in 1952. They're the only thing keeping the dark ones away from our world." The scratching in the walls grew louder, and I saw cracks beginning to form in the plaster. The dark shapes in the corners were becoming more solid, looking like twisted versions of hungry customers, their mouths filled with too many teeth. "But why here?" I asked, backing away from the spice cabinet. "Why our KFC?" "This location," the voice explained, "sits on a crossing point between worlds. The original restaurant I built here wasn't just for serving chicken. It was to guard this place. The recipe was never about the chicken, Marcus. It was about keeping them hungry for something other than human souls." The cracks in the walls were spreading, and I could hear what sounded like thousands of whispers coming from behind them, but these weren't like the Colonel's voice. These whispers were filled with hunger and darkness. The restaurant's windows began to fog up, dark shapes pressing against them from the outside. The Colonel's portrait was now completely animated, his painted form pacing back and forth within the frame. "There's only one way to fix this," the Colonel said. You need to remake the seal. The recipe must be prepared exactly right, not for eating, but for protection. I ran to the kitchen, grabbing ingredients as the colonel shouted instructions. The darkness was seeping in through every crack now, and the temperature kept dropping. I could hear the things in the walls getting closer, their hunger growing stronger. With shaking hands, I mixed the ingredients in a bowl, following the colonel's instructions exactly. This wasn't cooking. It was more like casting a spell. Each herb and spice had to be added in a specific order, at a specific time. The dark figures were getting bolder, stepping out of the shadows. I could see them clearly now. Twisted, hungry things that looked like people but moved all wrong, their bodies bending in impossible ways. "Now!" the colonel's voice thundered. "Throw the mixture into the fryer, quickly, boy!" I grabbed the bowl and ran to the fryer, dodging the reaching hands of the shadow creatures. The oil was boiling now, even though the power was off. The dark figures were closing in from all sides. With all my strength, I threw the mixture into the fryer. There was a moment of complete silence, then a blast of light so bright it felt like daylight had exploded inside the restaurant. The shadow creatures screamed, a sound I'll never forget, and began to melt away like ice in summer. The cracks in the walls sealed themselves, and warmth returned to the air. The colonel's portrait slowly returned to normal, but not before I saw him give me a small, grateful nod. When the morning crew arrived, everything looked normal. The restaurant was clean, the equipment was in place, and the colonel's portrait hung quietly on the wall, showing his familiar, friendly smile. Nobody believed my story, of course. But sometimes, during the late shift, I catch the colonel's painted eyes moving, watching over the restaurant. The spice cabinet is always locked now, and I check the seals every night at closing. I still work at KFC, but my job feels different now. I'm not just cleaning and cooking, I'm helping guard something important. The colonel's secret recipe isn't just about making the best fried chicken anymore. It's about keeping the darkness at bay, one piece of chicken at a time. And if you ever find yourself in our KFC late at night, and you think you hear whispers from the kitchen, or see the colonel's eyes move, just know that everything's under control. We're not just serving food here, we're serving protection, seasoned with 11 herbs and spices. I never thought my regular night shift at KFC would turn into the most terrifying night of my life. My name is Chloe, and I've been working at this location on the outskirts of Sydney for about 6 months now. The store sits alone on a quiet road, surrounded by empty lots and old warehouses. Most nights are slow, with just a few tired truckers stopping by for a quick meal. That night started like any other. I arrived at 10 p.m. ready for my overnight shift. The evening crew left shortly after, leaving me with just 2 other co-workers, Mike, our cook, and Sarah, who usually handles the drive-through window. The store was quiet, almost too quiet, with only the gentle hum of the kitchen equipment keeping us company. "Looks like another slow night," Mike said, cleaning the fryers. I nodded, organizing the front counter and checking our supplies. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the empty dining room. Through the large windows, I could see the darkness pressing against the glass, broken only by the occasional passing car. Little did I know that in just a few hours, everything would change. If I had known what was waiting for us in the storage room, I would have never agreed to work that shift. But there I was, completely unaware that this ordinary night would become a nightmare I would never forget. Sarah was the first to notice something wasn't right. Around 11:45 p.m., she kept looking over her shoulder, saying she felt like someone was watching her. I brushed it off. We all get jumpy during the late shift, but now I wish I had paid more attention to her warning. The trouble started small, so small that at first, we didn't even notice it. Around midnight, the temperature in the store dropped suddenly. I remember wrapping my arms around myself, wondering if the heating system had broken down again. Mike complained about the cold while preparing a new batch of chicken, his breath visible in the kitchen air. "Did someone leave the back door open?" Sarah asked, rubbing her arms. I checked. All doors were locked tight. That's when we heard the first strange sound, a soft scratching noise coming from somewhere in the ceiling. It moved slowly, like something was crawling through the vents. "Probably just rats," Mike said, but his voice trembled slightly. We tried to continue with our work, but the scratching got louder, more deliberate. It seemed to follow us around the store, stopping whenever we looked up. The security cameras showed nothing unusual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Then the lights started flickering, just subtle enough to make us question if we were imagining it. The restaurant's normally bright interior began to feel darker, the shadows in the corners growing deeper. Every time I walked past the storage room door, I felt a cold draft, even though I knew it was sealed shut. Sarah tried calling the manager, but her phone wouldn't work. Neither would mine or Mike's. We were completely cut off, alone in our bright island of light surrounded by the vast Australian darkness. At exactly 12:30 a.m., everything changed. I was counting the register when I heard Sarah scream from near the storage room. The sound cut through the quiet store like a knife, making my heart jump into my throat. Mike and I ran to her, finding her frozen in place, pointing at something on the floor. There, leading from under the storage room door, was a trail of wet, red footprints. They weren't shoes. They were bare feet, small like a child's, but something about them looked wrong. The prints were too deep, as if whatever made them was incredibly heavy. "Those weren't there 5 minutes ago," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "I just walked past here, and the floor was clean." The footprints led from the storage room into the main dining area, where they suddenly stopped in the middle of the floor. No return prints, no explanation for where they ended. Mike grabbed a mop, thinking it was a prank, but when he tried to clean them, the prints wouldn't wash away. The red liquid seemed to seep into the tiles, staining them permanently. We checked everyone's shoes. None matched the prints. Besides, these were clearly bare feet, and we all wore our required work shoes. The security camera footage showed nothing. One moment the floor was clean, the next the prints appeared, as if they had always been there. That's when we heard the first knock coming from inside the storage room. None of us wanted to open that storage room door, but we knew we had to. As the senior staff member on duty, I took the lead, my hands shaking as I reached for the handle. The metal felt ice cold against my skin, and I could have sworn I heard whispering from the other side. When I pushed the door open, the fluorescent light inside flickered to life, revealing our neat rows of supplies and ingredients. Everything looked normal at first glance, until we noticed the freezer door standing open, cold mist rolling out across the floor. I was sure I had closed it earlier. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the small space. "Is anyone in here?" The only response was the steady drip of water somewhere in the darkness. As we moved further into the room, the temperature dropped even more. Our breath came out in white puffs, despite the Australian summer heat outside. That's when we found it, a small handprint on the inside of the freezer door, made in what looked like red paint. But it wasn't paint. The substance was still wet, still warm. Sarah started crying, and Mike suggested we call the police. But before we could move, the storage room door slammed shut behind us with a bang that made us all jump. We were trapped in the cold darkness, with something we couldn't see or understand. And then we heard the giggling, high-pitched, childlike laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The next few minutes felt like hours as we huddled together in the storage room, trying to stay calm. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against our ears. The only light came from our phone flashlights, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Suddenly, our lights caught something moving between the shelves. A small figure, no taller than a child, but moving in a way that no child should move. It crawled along the floor, its movements jerky and unnatural. I felt my throat close up with fear as it came closer. "Who are you?" Mike called out, his voice cracking. The figure stopped, and in the beam of our lights, We saw it clearly for the first time. It looked like a young girl in a dirty KFC uniform, but her skin was gray and her eyes were completely black, like empty spaces in her face. She smiled at us, revealing teeth that were sharp and pointed. "I used to work here," she said in a voice that sounded like many voices speaking at once. "A long time ago, before the accident." None of us had heard of any accident, but the way she said it made my skin crawl. Sarah grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. "The missing girl," she whispered. "Remember that old news story? About the worker who disappeared 20 years ago?" I did remember. It was a local legend, about a young employee who vanished during her shift, never to be found. The figure moved closer, leaving those same wet footprints we had seen earlier. "They never found me," she said, her voice changing to sound more childlike, more vulnerable. "I've been waiting here, watching, all these years, in the cold." She pointed to the freezer, and suddenly I understood the horrible truth. We backed away as she told us her story, how she had been working late one night, just like us, when something went wrong. How she had gotten locked in the freezer by accident, how no one had heard her cries for help. How she had waited in the dark and cold until... "But now you're here," she said, her smile growing wider, impossibly wide. "Now I won't be alone anymore." The shelves around us began to shake, boxes falling to the floor. The temperature dropped even lower, and frost started forming on the walls. Mike made a break for the door, managing to get it open. We ran into the main store area, but the girl, or whatever she was, followed us, moving in that terrible crawling way. The lights in the store went crazy, flashing on and off like a storm. "Please," I begged. "We can help you. We can tell people what happened to you." But she just laughed that horrible laugh again, reaching out toward us with gray, frozen fingers. Everything happened so fast after that. The girl's form started changing, growing larger, more distorted. The temperature in the store dropped so low that the windows frosted over. We could see our breath in the air as we ran, trying to find a way out. Sarah remembered the emergency exit in the kitchen, and we made a dash for it. Behind us, the girl's laughter turned into an angry shriek that made the windows shake. Kitchen equipment flew off the counters, and the fryers exploded with hot oil that somehow froze midair. We reached the emergency exit, but it wouldn't budge. Mike and I threw our weight against it while Sarah screamed that the girl was getting closer. Through the chaos, I could hear her singing an old KFC jingle in that terrible multi-voice way. Just when we thought we were trapped, the door finally gave way. We burst out into the warm Sydney night, running across the parking lot without looking back. Behind us, the store's lights were going crazy, like a silent lightning storm was happening inside. When we reached Mike's car, we piled in and sped away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the girl standing in the doorway of the store, watching us leave. For a moment, she looked sad, almost human again, before disappearing like smoke. Nobody believed our story, of course. The manager found the store in complete chaos the next morning. Equipment thrown around, freezer door open, and those footprints still stained into the floor. They blamed it on vandals, but they couldn't explain the ice that covered everything in the middle of summer. I quit my job that day. So did Mike and Sarah. We couldn't bear the thought of going back there, of facing what we had seen. Sometimes I drive past the store late at night, and I swear I can see a small figure watching from the windows, waiting for someone else to work the midnight shift. The old story about the missing girl was true. We looked it up later. Her name was Lucy Chen, and she disappeared without a trace in 1995. They never found her body, but now we know why. She's still there, trapped between this world and whatever comes next, forever working the midnight shift. I've learned to avoid working late nights since then, and whenever I pass a KFC, especially the quiet ones on the edge of town, I say a little prayer for Lucy, but mostly I pray that she stays there, in that store on the outskirts of Sydney, and doesn't decide to follow me home. Some people say the store is haunted, that they hear strange sounds late at night. The company has tried everything: new security systems, cameras, even bringing in experts to check the building. But the footprints never went away. And on quiet nights, if you listen carefully, you might hear a child singing an old KFC jingle, waiting for someone to join her eternal shift. I never thought working the closing shift at KFC would change my life forever. My name is Natalie P., and I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me last autumn in downtown Chicago. Something that made me question everything I knew about reality. It was a quiet Thursday night, and the restaurant was almost empty. The smell of fried chicken and warm spices filled the air as I wiped down tables, getting ready to close. The street outside was dark, except for the orange glow of street lights, and most other stores had already closed for the night. I had been working at this KFC for 6 months, and everything was normal until that night. The red sauce we use, you know, the one that comes with almost every meal, had always been just sauce. But as I was checking the sauce dispensers before closing, something caught my eye. The sauce in the container wasn't sitting still like it should have been. At first, I thought it was just bubbles from when we refilled it earlier. But then I saw something that made my stomach turn. The sauce was moving on its own, making tiny shapes that looked almost like, well, I wasn't sure what they looked like yet. But I knew this wasn't normal. Not at all. I looked at my phone. 8:55 p.m. Something told me I should leave right then, but curiosity got the better of me. I had to know what was happening to that sauce. I moved closer to the sauce dispenser, holding my phone's flashlight up to get a better look. The red liquid was definitely moving, but not like normal sauce would move. It was creating patterns, almost like tiny dancers performing a strange dance. "Hey, is anyone still here?" I called out, thinking maybe one of my coworkers was playing a prank. The only response was the quiet hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of traffic outside. I grabbed a plastic spoon and gently poked at the sauce. It responded to my touch in the weirdest way, pulling away like it was alive. My hands started shaking, but I couldn't look away. The sauce was changing color too, shifting from its normal bright red to something darker, more like blood. The clock on the wall ticked closer to 9 o'clock p.m. With each passing minute, the movement in the sauce became more organized. It wasn't random anymore. The shapes were starting to look like tiny figures with arms and legs. I tried to take a video with my phone, but every time I pressed record, the screen went black. "This isn't happening," I whispered to myself. But it was happening, and it was about to get much worse. When the clock struck 9 o'clock p.m., everything changed. The sauce wasn't just moving anymore. It was growing. The tiny figures I saw before were getting bigger, pushing against the plastic walls of the dispenser. The whole container started shaking, making a sound like someone whispering in a language I didn't understand. I backed away, bumping into the counter behind me. The temperature in the restaurant dropped so much I could see my breath. The lights started flickering, and in those moments of darkness, I swear I could hear tiny voices coming from the sauce dispenser. "Hello?" A small voice called out, sounding like a child's whisper. But it was coming from the sauce. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The voice came again, stronger this time. "We've been waiting for someone like you, Natalie." How did it know my name? I hadn't worn my name tag that day. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might explode. The sauce was now a deep, dark red, almost black, and the figures inside were the size of my fingers. One of them pressed its hand against the plastic, leaving a small handprint that looked too real to be just sauce. I finally found the strength to move. I turned around and ran toward the front door, fumbling with my keys. But when I tried to unlock it, the key wouldn't turn. I was trapped inside with whatever that thing was becoming. The whispering got louder, and now I could feel something warm and wet dripping behind me. I slowly turned around, and what I saw made me scream. The sauce dispenser had cracked open, and the liquid was pouring out onto the floor. But it wasn't spreading like normal liquid would. It was gathering itself into a pile that kept growing taller. "We just want to play," the voices said together, and the pile of sauce started taking shape. It looked like a group of children holding hands, but their faces were wrong, too smooth, with holes where their eyes should be. I ran to the back door, but it was locked too. The windows wouldn't break no matter how hard I hit them. The sauce creatures were getting closer, leaving tiny red footprints on the floor. They smelled like chicken and something else, something old and wrong. My phone had no signal, and the lights were getting dimmer. I was running out of options, and the sauce children were getting closer. I grabbed a mop from the cleaning closet and held it in front of me like a weapon. The sauce children stopped moving, tilting their heads in a way that reminded me of curious puppies, if puppies were made of living sauce and had black holes for eyes. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. They formed a circle around me, their tiny hands still linked together. The one that seemed to be their leader stepped forward. "We want to share our story," it said. "We've been trapped in this sauce for so long, waiting for someone who could see us. The recipe that made us..." It wasn't just spices and tomatoes. The leader reached out its hand toward me. A drop of sauce fell from its finger and hit the floor, sizzling like it was boiling hot. The others started humming a song that made my teeth hurt and my head spin. "Long ago," the leader continued, "we were just like you, but someone put us in here, turned us into this. We need your help to become real again." I gripped the mop tighter, my mind racing. Were they telling the truth? And even if they were, could I trust them? The sauce children's story poured out like a flood. They had once been real children, playing in this very building back when it was something else. An old factory that made special sauces. There had been an accident, they said. Or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. The factory owner had been experimenting with strange ingredients, trying to make the perfect sauce. But something went wrong, and the children who were there that day, children of the workers, got mixed into the batch. "We've been passed down through every recipe since then," they explained, "waiting for someone who could see us, help us. The sauce keeps changing, but we stay the same." I felt sick thinking about how many people, including me, had eaten this sauce. But the sauce children assured me that they couldn't hurt anyone who ate it. They could only try to make themselves seen. "Tonight is special," they said. "It's the anniversary of the accident. We're stronger now, and with your help, we might be able to break free." I had a choice to make. I could try to help these sauce children, or I could keep trying to escape. The sound of their humming filled my head, making it hard to think clearly. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, lowering the mop. The sauce children moved closer, their forms becoming more solid, more human-like. "We need your voice," they said. "Join our song. Help us remember what it was like to be real." I started humming with them, and something strange happened. The sauce began to change color again, turning lighter, more natural. The children's faces became clearer, showing real eyes, noses, and mouths. But as they became more real, I felt myself getting weaker. The room started spinning, and I realized they weren't just using my voice, they were using my energy, my life force. I had to make a decision fast. Keep helping them and risk losing myself, or stop and leave them trapped forever. In the end, I chose to help them. I kept humming even as my legs got weak and my vision blurred. The sauce children's song grew stronger, and their bodies became more solid with each passing minute. Just when I thought I couldn't stay conscious any longer, there was a bright flash of light. The humming stopped, and I fell to my knees. When I opened my eyes, the sauce children were gone. In their place stood 7 real children, looking confused but happy. They hugged me, their bodies warm and solid, before walking toward the front door. It opened on its own, letting in the cool night air. One by one, they walked out into the darkness, turning to wave goodbye before disappearing into the night. I was alone again in the KFC, surrounded by puddles of normal red sauce. The clock showed 10 o'clock p.m., and everything looked perfectly ordinary. If it wasn't for my weak legs and the tiny handprints on the floor, I might have thought it was all a dream. I cleaned up the mess and left that night, knowing I would never look at KFC's red sauce the same way again. Sometimes when I pass by the restaurant at night, I think I hear faint humming. But the sauce children never appeared again. They were finally free. I still work at KFC, but I always check the sauce dispensers at closing time, just in case there are other stories waiting to be heard, other children waiting to be set free. I never thought a regular night shift at KFC would change my life forever. My name is Isabella R., and I work at the store near the outskirts of Manila. The night was different from the start. The air felt thick and heavy, making my uniform stick to my skin. The clock showed 11:20 p.m., and I was getting ready to close up. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, casting strange shadows on the walls. Most of my coworkers had already left, leaving me alone to handle any last-minute customers. The sound of the door chime made me jump. An old woman walked in, her white hair neatly tied back. She smiled at me, but something about her smile made my stomach turn. "One original recipe chicken meal, please," she said in a soft voice. I nodded and walked to the kitchen to prepare her order. As I reached for the ingredients, something strange happened. The pieces of chicken, lettuce, and tomatoes started moving on their own. My hands shook as I watched them slide across the counter, forming shapes that looked like letters. They weren't in English or Filipino. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I blinked hard, thinking I was just tired. But when I opened my eyes, the ingredients were still moving, still spelling out something I couldn't understand. The old woman's reflection appeared in the kitchen's metal surface, but she looked different now. Her eyes were completely black. Trying to stay calm, I grabbed my phone to take a picture of the moving ingredients, but it wouldn't turn on. The kitchen felt colder now, even though it was a humid night. I heard the old woman humming from the counter, a tune that made my skin crawl. More ingredients started moving, forming new patterns. A bottle of ketchup exploded without anyone touching it, spraying red liquid everywhere. But instead of falling normally, the ketchup hung in the air, forming more of those strange symbols. My coworker Jenny had taught me about old Filipino stories, about warning signs and spirits. This felt like one of those stories coming to life. The symbols started glowing faintly, giving off a red light that wasn't from the kitchen lamps. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, nobody was there. The old woman was still at the counter, but her reflection in the window showed something else. A tall, dark figure with long fingers. I could hear her humming getting louder, and the tune started to sound like words I almost understood. The symbols made from the ingredients began to burn, leaving marks on the counter. I wanted to run, but something told me this warning was important, that I needed to understand it to survive what was coming. The old woman called out from the counter, "Is my order ready, dear?" But her voice had changed. It sounded like many voices speaking at once. When I peeked through the kitchen window, I saw more customers had entered the store. But something was wrong. They all looked exactly like the old woman. The kitchen equipment started turning on by itself. The fryers bubbled with oil that had turned black, and cold steam poured out of the freezer. The symbols on the counter began to move, crawling across the surface like strange insects made of food. My hands trembled as I watched the chicken pieces in the fryer take on shapes I'd never seen before. They looked like small faces screaming. The lettuce leaves turned dark and started whispering in voices too quiet to understand. Every ingredient I touched felt alive, pulsing with a strange energy. I heard the door chime again and again, but the security cameras showed nobody entering. The old women, now there were 7 of them, stood perfectly still at the counter, their black eyes fixed on the kitchen. Their humming grew louder, and I realized they were calling something, summoning something from the darkness beyond our store's windows. The clock on the wall stopped at 11:20 p.m., even though time was clearly passing. Outside, the streets had gone completely dark, except for our KFC sign that now glowed with a strange purple light. More copies of the old woman kept appearing inside the store, but none of them showed up on the security cameras. The symbols made from the ingredients started floating off the counter, hanging in the air like glowing signs. I recognized one shape. It looked like the mark my grandmother once drew to protect our house from bad spirits. But these symbols were different, more complex, and they seemed to be trying to tell me something. The humming turned into chanting, and the old women began moving in a circle. Their features started changing, their skin becoming darker, their fingers longer, their teeth sharper. The air felt thick with a strange smell, like burning sugar in something rotting. My phone suddenly turned back on, but instead of showing the time, it displayed the same symbols that floated around the kitchen. A message appeared. "You have been chosen." The words glowed and shifted between English, Filipino, and those strange symbols I couldn't read. The old women's chanting grew louder and their circle got tighter. One of them pointed at me with a long, dark finger and spoke in that many-voiced way. "Isabella, keeper of the gate, you must make the choice." The others echoed her words, their black eyes fixed on me. The symbols floating in the air started spinning faster, and I began to understand them. They weren't just warnings, they were instructions. The KFC kitchen had been chosen as a meeting place between our world and another. The last order of the night wasn't really an order at all. It was a key to open something. My grandmother's stories about the old spirits of Manila came flooding back. She told me about places where the wall between worlds was thin, where spirits could cross over. She never mentioned fast food restaurants, but she did say these places could appear anywhere, especially when the air was thick with humidity and the night was deep. The ingredients continued to move and transform. The chicken pieces formed a map of Manila, but it showed places I'd never seen before. Hidden spots where other gates might be. The old women's fingers grew longer, nearly touching me across the counter, their nails turning into dark claws. The symbols revealed the truth. I wasn't chosen by accident. My grandmother had been a keeper of gates too, protecting Manila from things that tried to cross over. Now it was my turn, and this KFC kitchen was my post. The old women weren't evil spirits. They were guardians, testing me, teaching me in their strange way. The humming changed again, becoming a song I remembered from childhood, a lullaby my grandmother used to sing. But now I understood the real words hidden in the tune, instructions passed down through generations of gatekeepers. The ingredients stopped moving and formed a circle on the counter. Chicken, lettuce, tomatoes, and sauces arranged in a pattern that looked like a door. "Will you accept your role?" the old women asked together. Their black eyes had turned golden, and their forms shifted between human and something ancient, something that existed long before Manila had buildings and streets. The air crackled with energy, and I felt a power I'd never known before flowing through the kitchen. The choice was mine. I could run away and forget everything, or I could accept my family's legacy and become something more than just a KFC worker. The symbols swirled around me, waiting for my answer. I reached out and touched the circle of ingredients. A surge of energy flowed through me, and suddenly I could see Manila as it really was. A city full of hidden doors and ancient spirits, some helpful, some dangerous. The old women smiled, their forms settling into something between human and spirit. The kitchen transformed around me. What looked like ordinary cooking equipment now revealed itself as tools for a gatekeeper. The fryers could purify dark energy, the freezer could trap harmful spirits, and the secret blend of herbs and spices wasn't just for chicken, it was a powerful protection spell. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Some places have power, Isabella. Some jobs are more than they seem." Now I understood why she had smiled when I told her about my job at KFC. She knew this day would come. The old women began teaching me the true names of things, showing me how to use my new powers. The symbols became clear as day, a language older than words, used by gatekeepers throughout time. The humidity of the night wasn't just weather. It was the breath of Manila itself, helping us keep the balance between worlds. That humid night at KFC changed everything. I still work the night shift, but now I know my real job. The last order is always the most important. That's when the barriers between worlds are thinnest, when I need to be most alert. Some customers are really spirits checking on me, making sure I'm keeping the gate safe. The old women visit sometimes, teaching me more about being a gatekeeper. I've learned to read the symbols and floating ingredients, to hear the messages in humming fluorescent lights, to see beyond what others see. My grandmother's stories weren't just stories, they were lessons preparing me for this role. Manila looks different to me now. Behind the busy streets and modern buildings, I see the ancient city, full of magic and mystery. Other gatekeepers work in unexpected places, convenience stores, internet cafes, food stalls, and busy markets. We protect the city in our own ways, keeping the balance between worlds. Sometimes, late at night, new customers come in with black eyes and strange smiles. I serve them their order, but we both know it's more than just food. It's a promise to protect, to watch, to keep the gates. And when the ingredients start moving, spelling out warnings or messages, I no longer feel afraid. This is who I am now. Isabella R., KFC worker and keeper of the gate, taking the last order of the night in a Manila that few people ever truly see.